Let's go.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of his Storybox. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome Doug Cartwright. He is the CEO and founder of The Daily Shifts, an online company dedicated to inspiring lasting transformations of the mind, body, and soul. How many of us actually need that? And he's the author of a forthcoming book. I believe this is your first book, right?
Number one.
Number one. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. It's called Holy Shit. We're Alive. Interesting title, man. Can't wait to get into it. As you surely you can tell from the title, Holy Shit, We're Alive is not another boring, enlightening self-help book. I have no doubt that it is. Instead, Doug shares his unusual journey from self-made millionaire at age 24. So the age that I'm at right now, 24, and I'm not a millionaire. Sometimes I wish I was. He's devoted Mormon, family man, and how he had to lose it all and go down a rabbit hole of psychedelics, world travel, heartbreak, meditation, and so much more to find his true purpose and happiness. Doug wrote Holy Shit, We're Alive in hopes of inspiring others and shares tactical steps that readers can take to cut through the noise and lead happier lives as a result. My goodness, man, Doug Cartwright, welcome so much to the Storybox podcast today, man.
I'm so stoked to be here, man. What an introduction.
Thank you for giving me the time for me to actually interview you, man. Like, this is going to be fun. Like the title, Holy Shit, I don't swear, but that's technically not me swearing. So we'll say that. But I'm excited to actually unbox your story a little bit and hear what you've actually journeyed through in just a moment. But before we do that, I have one question I love asking all my guests at the very, very start. I don't know if you've heard any of my other episodes, but this one, I think you might like it. What does success look like for you?
To me, success feels it's an interpersonal state of calm and centered and fulfillment and joy, and a lot of people believe success is the fancy car or the new job or the hot partner, the six-pack abs. And most people are out there living in what I call happy when syndrome, right? I'll be happy when my ship comes in. I'll be happy when my book sells 1 million copies, or when I pay off my debt, or I get the partner or the car. But the reality is we believe that those things will make us happy. That's why we want them.
Yep.
Right. And so true success is internal alignment. You're calm, you're not anxious, you're not overwhelmed. It's just that true moment in the now of feeling just bliss and overwhelm. Yeah.
So that, all being said, is easier said than done for
very much so.
Everyone. So for those people that actually want to get into alignment, find this true sense of self, purpose, fulfillment, you name it, whatever it is, and they're really wrestling with it, what advice would you give to them?
It's a really good question. I believe that, the hard part about quote unquote being human is we're raised with societal pressures. We're taught to go to college and get a job, and we're raised in specific religions, and we get these labels kind of placed on us early, especially in elementary and junior high, where it's either, you're the really smart kid, right? So I have to get good grades and get a good academic, scholarship, or you're the athlete and, or you're the cool jock, or you're the pretty girl, or you're the brainiac, or whatever it may be. And we have all of these labels. And so we seek kind of this validation to live up to who we were supposed to be. Like society, our family, religion, whatever, gives us these labels of who we need to be. And so we struggle so often in life to live up to that expectation. But true alignment and true happiness comes from when we're our most authentic, natural selves. Mm-hmm. And so to become who we truly are, we have to let go of who we thought we were supposed to be. Right. And so the reason we're unhappy is we're going out into the world trying to live up to the idea of who we think we're supposed to be. And a lot of times that's misaligned of who we truly are. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we struggle so much internally.
So how did you come to this realization for yourself?
Yeah. And that's just through my story, I was really lucky, in my early 20s. I was raised in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very high LDS or Mormon belief system, which is very strict rules. No caffeine, no sex, no alcohol, no smoking, no coffee, right? And the reward for living in honor of God is you get to live in like this special heaven, kingdom of heaven, where you get to live in bliss for eternity with your wife and family forever. There's like in Mormonism, there's multiple heavens, so not just one heaven. There's like degrees of glory, they call it, within it. And so you have this really, really heavy expectation growing up of like what to dress like, who to be, just the verbiage, the way you talk, and to be like an upstanding citizen in your community. And I was also captain of the football team in high school. I always tell people I was a high school all-star, right? Captain of the football team. I was a community leader. I was student body vice president. And I was doing everything that I was, quote unquote, supposed to be doing, right? And then the first hiccup came is, you're called to serve a mission, a service mission when you're 19.
Yep.
You go all over the world. I had friends going to Samoa and Russia and whatnot. I got actually called to Auckland, New Zealand. So your neighbor over there.
Ah,
yeah.
Very nice.
Yes. Yes. I'm familiar with that part of the world. And, I actually ended up getting sent home early because I didn't obey the rules. And so,
do tell.
I did. Yeah. So really it was there's a level of worthiness you're required to live up to before you go out. Right. So, being morally clean, you're not drinking, you're not doing stuff with girls. I had a girlfriend at the time when I was, 18, and we fooled around, physically, and I lied about it. So you have like this interview with like a church leader, and they're like, okay, are you living, quote unquote, they call it the Law of Chastity, where it's like, are you being, aligned, keeping your hands to yourself and not being sexually active? And I said, yeah, I am. And I wasn't. And so I lied. And so I went out there and I just felt to New Zealand, and I just felt immense amount of guilt and shame. Right? It's like, oh my gosh, I lied. I'm, quote unquote, not worthy to be here. I'm unworthy. I'm lying to God. God's mad at me. So I confessed on my mission, and they actually sent me back to the States. And so that was kind of the first time where it was like, oh, wait, I'm not living up to the story that I'm supposed to be. I'm not this perfect kind of stand-up citizen or community member. And God's, quote unquote, mad at me. And I feel like I started to let people down. But I was able to kind of overcompensate that pretty quickly, because when I was 19, 20, I was at the University of Utah. And I got recruited to work at a sales company. And I had uncapped commissions. And I had like this really light bulb moment when I was 19, where I started to understand sales and commissions. And it was the idea of getting paid on your production rather than your time. So I'm like, okay, I'm 19. If I just go produce good work, I can get paid for that, versus then just clocking in to a job and working a 9 to 5. And that kind of changed my paradigm a little bit. And really what I was battling over both of these experiences is, growing up, I was the fat kid, right? I was overweight. And so a story that I told about myself was that I was unworthy of love because something was physically wrong with me, right? I know that I'm overweight, and you obviously can see that because you can see it. So I now know I have to overcompensate and prove to you why I'm worthy, because there's something wrong with me, right? And so I wasn't getting validation from girls and whatnot. And I'm kind of this fat kid. I was kind of always in the shadow of being kind of really, truly the popular kid. There's always, I was kind of in the shadow of someone. So I get home from my mission. So I'm the fat kid, and I kind of screwed up in church, but then I kind of find this sales job with uncapped commissions. And this was kind of like my time to shine. And I met a really incredible mentor named Casey, who was the one who got me into like personal development and goal setting and healthy habits. And I remember he handed me a book called Goals by Brian Tracy. And I was actually in Florida on spring break, and I was reading it at the pool, and like something clicked. It was like, personal development is amazing, sales, and I can learn these skills. These are skills that I can learn. And so I embarked on this new career of door-to-door sales with uncapped commissions. And I saw a lot of success really, really early. And so, I mean, I was 19 years old. I was selling door-to-door alarm systems in Dallas, Texas, in the middle of the summer. And it's like, I'm sweating coming home. Like I remember like having like swass stains on my butt and like dripping armpits and like knocking on people's doors, trying to sell these alarm systems. Anyways, was very successful at it. And I remember in a 6-week period, I made $50,000 as a young kid. And I remember like getting my check and being like, whoa, my whole life is about to change. And so from that moment on, I fully committed to this job. I know I had great mentors that were like helping me become a good version of myself. But really what was happening was as I performed better in sales, I started making more money. I was getting recognition at my company, right? It's like, oh, cool. I remember someone called me the LeBron James of my company. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, I'm the man. I'm finally the man. Like I can prove all you guys that I'm the man. And so I got obsessed with this sales career where I was recruiting and training guys. And by the time I was 24, I'd cleared over $1 million in sales commissions. And the deeper wound though at the time was I didn't love myself. And I was trying to be someone everyone wanted me to be. And in regards to dating, like I've never gotten validation. So all of a sudden you give a 23-year-old a big chunk of change. And I just started spending that like crazy because all I was saying was like, hey, validate me. So I'm the guy that's seriously, I'm a big sports guy. I love the Utah Jazz. I love University of Utah football. I love NFL. So I'm the guy that's going to the Super Bowls. I'm going to the NBA playoffs. I'm going to the World Series. I'm buying front row tickets. And there was like, if you go look back like in my Instagram page, you'll see like this series of photos where I'm at like a game every weekend. And the peak of it all is when I spent like $15,000 to sit in a suite with Kevin Durant at the Super Bowl. And it was like the highlight, right? It looked really cool on Instagram. You're like, oh, people are stoked. But inside, like I was miserable. I remember I missed the whole game because I was just scrolling through my Instagram, looking at how many likes I was going to get. And so I can't hit this crossroads. So to really answer your question here, the crossroads I hit was, it was like, I coined it the success void, right? I had a great job. I was hanging out with pretty girls. I was traveling the world. I was sitting front row at sporting events. I was driving, $100,000 Mercedes. And on paper, it looked really good. But internally, there was like this deep, deep void. And I'm like, I am not happy. Like, not only, I made some screw ups in my early teens or in my early 20s. I've overcompensated those. I've done more to prove everyone that I'm worthy of love. But I still have this deep, deep void. And that moment, that time in my life was really scary. And that was really the time where I looked deeper and it's like, okay, we need to start making some changes here.
Did the church sort of kick you out entirely?
So it's crazy. You talk about your mom being super conservative. My mom is very conservative too, very, lives the standards of the Mormon faith. And I was in quote unquote a disciplinary council because of my practice, right, in the church. And it was this continuous, like, I kept screwing up with girls. Right? I kept being intimate with girls. And every time you do that, it's like, they're going to kick you out of the church. And so I literally was at the point where I was about to get excommunicated from the church. Like they were going to literally kick me out of the church. I had this council. They're like, yeah, you're done. And my mom flies in last minute, calls the leader at the time. She's like, you cannot kick my son out. It's going to be, devastating for him, blah, 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 blah. So they gave me like a slap on the wrist. They call it a disfellowshipment, where it's kind of like you're just not in good standing with the church. So it was the second time I'd been disfellowshipped. I was about to get excommunicated. Didn't. Mom comes in to save the day, right? But it was kind of at that point, it was too late anyways. And then kind of after my, exploration, my deep dive, otherwise, I actually, by choice in 2017, removed my records from the church. So I'm technically not a Mormon anymore, but that was my choice. But, if I wouldn't have done that, if it wasn't for my mom, they would have kicked me out anyways.
See, that's what I have a somewhat problem with is, like, in order to quite go to heaven and be with God one day, you have to have this record. And it's basically like the faith by works kind of thing. It's a ridiculous mindset. I don't believe that in the slightest. I believe that when you accept Christ as your Lord and Savior, then you're going to heaven. You don't have to work this, I guess you could say, perfect in quotation marks lifestyle in order to match up. And then one day you get to heaven and say, God pulls out a list and says, hey, you didn't match up all these things and you didn't tick them all off. Like, man.
I'm with you. I had an experience, what my first time, so around this time of having this success void, I'm like searching. I'm like, okay, church isn't working for me. Money's not the answer, right? Like traveling is not the answer. Sporting events isn't the answer. Being the ultimate bachelor is not the answer. What's the answer here? Like, what is going on? And it was kind of this dark time. And around the time I was open to new ideas, and I came across a lot of studies that talked about the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics. And at this point, being, mid-20s, raised in a conservative Christian home in Utah, you're literally taught that all drugs are the same and they're all meth. And if you do them once, you're going to get addicted and die. It's just kind of like the narrative that's kind of pumped into your brain. And so I'm reading some of these studies and some of these quotes from really prominent entrepreneurs and business leaders who are, claiming that these psychedelic medicines have profound, beautiful impact on their life and their career. And I'm like, what in the hell? Like, what? Like, I remember the first time reading something like that, my jaw dropped. Because there's the quote from Steve Jobs that says, doing LSD was one of the most profound experiences of my life. And there's another quote from Tim Ferriss who says, every self-made billionaire I know actively participates in psychedelic experiences. And in my head, the correlation I make is like, okay, well, if the CEO of, a big corporation gets caught up in a cocaine scandal, that's front page news. He's out and, their stock drops 30%. But there's really creative geniuses openly talking about the benefits of psychedelics. I'm like, there's got to be something here. And so my interest was piqued. And so literally a couple of weeks later, maybe 2, it was really close after I kind of opened up the door here. I'm at a party up in Eden, Utah, a beautiful cabin party. And a high school friend, if I hadn't seen in years, is there. And it's like, hey, Doug, not sure if you're interested in this, but I have some MDMA here, which technically some people don't classify as a psychedelic. The psychedelics you're talking about are LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, ayahuasca, things like that. And MDMA has, benefits as well. And I'm like, no way, I've never been offered anything like this before in my life. And right after I read benefits of it, I get offered. I'm like, I remember, my head was saying no, but my soul was screaming yes. And I'm like, I have to try this. I have to go down the rabbit hole. I have to just explore and see what this is all about. Anyways, so I take this MDMA pill, and my best friend literally took the exact same amount at the exact same time as me. And so it was his first time ever too. So like, cool, if we're doing it, let's do it together. Right. So, 45 minutes into it, it kicks in. And anyone who's done MDMA, at a rave or whatever, I kind of have a typical MDMA. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. And the music is the most incredible music I've ever heard. And this light show is like the coolest. And I love everyone and like everyone give me a hug, and I'm kind of having an MDMA experience. But, there's a point kind of at the beginning where I have this kind of self-talk in my head. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is fun. But this isn't life-changing like I've read. I'm not healing. And I remember kind of having this moment where you got the angel on one your shoulder and the devil on the other. And it was like, we slope here. You're going to do it tonight and you're never going to do this again. Cause it's a gateway drug and you're going to end up doing meth and being addicted and die, And so I'm like, okay. And then I have this moment, for sure, I'm having an experience. And I'm laying down on this hardwood floor at this cabin. And I go to stand up and I have this oh shit, I need help. I need help right now. And my body was frozen. And I felt I can't explain it, but my soul was falling out of my body. And everything was in really, really slow motion. And I almost was getting, like memories that I had forgotten about from my childhood were popping up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like they talk about this, like you're going to like, I'm remembering my life and I'm about to die. And I literally thought I was dying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna have to call my mom and tell her that I took drugs at a cabin and died. And it was, I don't know how long it was. I want to say it was maybe only a couple of seconds, but it was horrific. For like 8 to 10 seconds, it was like, I'm stuck, I'm dead, it's over. Then it was kind of like this like wong, 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 wong. And I was like something had changed. I remember like looking at my hands, being like, what just happened? And so I go to open up this door at this cabin. And I don't know how to explain it, but the best way is to explain it. I was in another dimension. And I know this sounds crazy. Like it sounds woo-woo weird, but I was physically, it wasn't a hallucination. I was literally on a dimension on top of this dimension. Everything was way more real. I could see energy and anything that had been alive. I could look at someone and kind of just know a lot more about them. And it was the most incredible, beautiful, like, I tell people it's like I got through the veil in a sense. And I had a moment to kind of go back to what we were talking about. You know, I went outside on the patio, overlooked this lake, and I could see the earth's soul breathing. And I'm like, oh, wait, Mother Earth. Oh, I get it. It's an actual being entity. Like there's a reason they call it, oh, okay, I get it. It has a soul. And then I walk back inside, and then this like beam of light socks me on the top of the head. And it's the love of the creator. And it's the most incredible, indescribable, immense love and connection you could ever imagine. And to your point, it's not, you don't have to earn it. It's there no matter what. It's not like it's looking at a list. It's like, okay, have you been a good boy? Have you done this? There's no checklist. It was the incredible, immense love from the creator, whatever you want to call it, God, universe, soul, divine, whatever your word is. It's this incredible universal energy that cares about us infinitely. And I felt that for the first time in my life. And it just completely overwhelmed me. And the rest of the night, you know, I went into this other room and kind of closed my eyes and I started hallucinating and kind of had these weird hallucinations about, you know, why I'm on earth and what happens when we die. And anyways, it was this really incredible experience. But the thing that was really tricky about it was I thought that's what happened to everyone when they take MDMA. And so afterwards, I'm like talking to my buddy and I'm like, hey, you know, what did you learn in the spirit world? He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, when you got to that other dimension, like, what did you learn about life? Like, I saw, like, you know, I feel like my purpose of life and I felt the love of God. And he's like, what are you talking about? And so there was a brief moment after this experience where I was actually extremely panicked because I'm like, oh, I messed up my brain. Like I've gone Looney Tunes. Like I checked me into a psych ward, right? Put me in the straitjacket. I believe in another dimension and I felt God. Like, yeah, you say that on the street, they put you in a crazy bin. And so like I've messed up my mind. And so there was a period after this experience, I was like, oh shoot, I should have never played in this field. I've completely screwed everything up, whatnot. But the first coincidence and synchronicity I want to share is that, you know, 8 years, or excuse me, couple years, was it 8 years? So this happened in 2017 on my Mormon mission. Yeah, 8 years earlier, I was on my Mormon mission in New Zealand and I kept having this recurring dream. And I have it written down in my missionary journal. But in the dream, I'm looking through like this sliding glass door and I look on the counter through the window and I see like this white birthday cake. And right before I wake up, I zoom in over the cake and I look down and in really big red frosting, it just says June 10th. So me and my companion at the time on my Mormon mission made it into this really funny inside joke. Like, okay, June 10th, something crazy is going to happen on June 10th. Anyways, June 10th came on my mission, nothing happened. Anyways, zooming back to the story, one of my really good sober friends was there and he recorded me talking in like this other dimension that I thought I was in, that I felt like I was in. And he sent me the video. And so I was showing a friend of mine, like, hey, check this out. Here's me in this dimension, like, you know, speaking in this dimension. And I look at the timestamp on the bottom of the video. It's June 10th.
Damn.
And I'm like, what is going on? So that coincidence connecting to June 10th. So June 10th, 2017 is like my big day, like the day my life literally changed forever. That led me to be like, okay, that's too weird of a coincidence And, cutting a long story short, and I explain the whole story in my book, coming out for those that want a little bit more juicy stuff, dive into the book. But eventually what that experience did is it got me engaged and curious in life, in the weird coincidences. And that eventually led me down the road, meeting incredible people, traveling the world, talking to the psychologists and the therapists and the meditators and the professionals, which eventually led me working, with ayahuasca, which is a plant medicine. And that was, a really, really profound, pivotal moment of my life and my journey of self-healing. And to circle all the way back, allowed me to do the work to forget about the person who I thought I was supposed to be and gain the confidence and alignment to be my true, authentic self and share my gifts with the world.
What a crazy story, man.
And it's way crazier. So if you want the book, it's really, really wild. The book is a roller coaster, but that's
I have no doubt.
That's the of it. Yeah.
I have no doubt about that, man. Like, I have never taken drugs in my life, never had any alcohol, partly for two reasons, choice and then my own health. But I've always been fascinated by people who have actually taken drugs and the experience, because you're right, it is different for every single person that has taken a drug. Sometimes it is somewhat similar, but there's differences for each person. It's kind of relative. And I've always wondered, how real is it actually? Like, can you have this kind of experience without the drug? Or do you have to take the actual drug in order to sort of feel like your sense of centerness or get to the creator or Mother Earth or all that sort of stuff? Like, is it just the drug making it happen for you, and is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? I don't know.
It's a very valid question. And so I kind of have two angles on it. So it's, my first point is, no, you don't need these medicines and these substances, right? But it almost feels like a shortcut, not a shortcut, but more of like, you can do 20 years of therapy, or you can go do an ayahuasca retreat in over a weekend. You get in the same place. It's just the timing and the amount of effort, right? And it just gets so deep into your subconscious. And I think, a lot of people are like, well, maybe it was just your brain cells firing and, you just were making that up in your head. Totally possible. But to me, it doesn't matter. Like, my life is significantly better. I feel so much more joy. I feel so much happier, aligned, and true to who I am. So to me, it really doesn't matter if it was real or not. It's very real to me, and it's more real than this is real. So to me, it's real. And it doesn't really matter if it was just a weird synopsis firing off in my brain, because the results that it provided are really beautiful and life-changing.
That's cool, man. Like, I love how we've all got different stories. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's sort of, you have similarities that sort of pop up. And I mean, I've had my fair share of experiences where I've had conversations with God, and people might think that it's a bit, out there and woo-woo and what have you, but it was my experience. It's part of my story. I don't expect you to understand if you haven't been through anything like it. And I understand where you're coming from, even if you've taken drugs to actually get there. It doesn't matter how you get there.
Question: How does your conversations with God show up? Is it through like meditation or prayer, or like? I'm interested in that.
Well, it's a funny story in that, like, it's happened several times, but the main one that I do open up about in my book was actually, I was blind for a period of time. So I had meningitis, meningococcal, and I couldn't see. So one of my symptoms was I was sensitive to light. So I
got meningitis too. I've had
it.
Yeah.
That's another story. We've got to get into that.
That's another story, yeah.
But I was sitting in the hospital chair, and because when one sense is gone, you sort of like, you can't look around, you can't be distracted by all the things that are going on. So my brain went to, I guess you could say, a different place. And I was having this dialogue for over 4 hours with God. He was asking me all these questions. And the one question he kept coming back to was, why are you here? Why are you here? And I had no idea how to answer him. I'm like, well, it's your fault I'm here, isn't it? Like, I kept having that sort of mindset, because I went through countless other painful moments in my life, even before getting to this point. And up until this point, I was just sick of it all. So I was angry at God, angry at myself, angry at everyone. So I was really, really hating being there and being in pain. I was just sick of it. So for 4 hours, I was blaming God. And then at the end, he's like, do you trust me? And that hit me. I'm like,
chills.
Yeah, I got the chills. And like in that moment, I still get the chills when I tell the story. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Because you got to have a lumbar puncture.
Yeah.
So I had to go through a lumbar puncture, and there was a 50% chance of surviving that or potentially dying from it. You name it, all kinds of possible scenarios. I couldn't see the doctor, and the doctor only done one other lumbar puncture, which, you know, for me, I need to see his eyes because they're the windows to the soul for me to be able to trust you. I couldn't do that. But who was I really putting my trust in? Was it the doctor or was it God?
Wow.
So that was a massive, massive test. And thank God I did survive. But that was my experience, man. What was your experience with meningitis?
Wasn't nearly as powerful as yours, but in 2000, right after I got sent home from my Mormon mission, I remember, you know, the being blind. I remember driving home from a buddy's house at night. And I started feeling really sick. And as the cars would drive past, their headlights, and it was just like extremely blinding.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is this so intense? Like, what is going on? And I remember I had to pull over for a little bit and like lay down. And I remember like, what is going on? And so I get home, and I was living with my parents at the time. And I got really intense headache. And I would, you know, I woke my parents up, you know, I was like, I was 19 at the time. And I'm like, hey, I have a really bad headache. My dad was like, just take some ibuprofen. And so I did. I went back to bed, and it was like, it felt like someone was inside my head with a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked into their bedroom, and I'm like, if you guys don't take me to the hospital, I'm calling an ambulance.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, you're serious.
Mm.
Like, yeah. And so they took me in to the hospital, and they start doing all these tests. And then they're like doing the meningitis test. And I'm assuming you had bacterial, right?
Yeah. It was viral, but there was a high chance of me actually getting bacterial. So yeah. I wasn't out of the woods. So I had to stay in hospital another night, which I was blind again for I think 2 to 4 days.
Yeah.
So 2 days actually fully blind, and then vision impaired for 4. So
I never went fully blind. And so it turns out I had viral, which is the less dangerous one.
Yep.
But I mean, still the doctor comes in, he's like, yeah, you have viral meningitis. You have a 10% chance of dying. I'm like, 10% is really high. Like that's a really high percent chance of dying.
Yep.
And so they did it's called the blood patch, where they do the shot in your back and whatnot. And they pull the fluid out of your back and whatever. I guess they put a hole in my spinal fluid, and that made me extremely sick, extremely nauseous, because the spinal fluid was getting out. And then I was in the hospital for 2 days. And then they gave me what are called a blood patch. They take blood out of another part of your body and shoot it to where that hole is in your spinal fluid, which I guess clogs it up so it doesn't leak out anymore. Uh-huh. And I remember I went back to the hospital because they sent me home with that shot. I got super sick again. I remember I had to get wheelchaired into the hospital because I couldn't see, couldn't even stand up straight. They do this blood patch, and within 15 minutes, I was skipping out of the hospital.
Well,
it worked like instantly.
That did not happen to me.
And it's funny you bring that up because I haven't thought about that in a long time. And still, I don't know what I learned from that. You know, it was such a weird, out of left field thing that happened to me, and it's such a rare thing. I think you're the only other person I know that has meningitis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I just learned something from you today. That's cool. Right? It's I don't meet many people that have actually had meningitis either. Yeah. And to that extent, like, you understand what a lumbar puncture is. It sucks.
Brutal.
Right? And then I don't even think I had the blood patch. I don't think they gave that to me. But yeah. I had my mum actually film. I don't know where the movie's gone. I got a photo now. I had to film actually the mercury, sort of the silver stuff coming out of your spinal fluid.
Yeah, cool.
And into the vial. I thought it was mad. So I was trying to use humor as a way to distract myself from the pain. And my mum thought I was nuts. She's like, why do you want to film this? Why do you want a photo? I'm like, it's a record, like this is an experience and a half. Like how many people can actually say they had a massive needle, like super long, stick in the back of their spine?
Yeah,
like, yeah, but no, it's interesting, man.
I didn't get to talk to God though. I wish I would have.
No, like that. I think that was just, I was in a very dark place of my life at the time as well. So I think he was just trying to get my attention for a long period of time. I was going a million miles an hour in life, had no rest. And then all of a sudden, like God often does for me, is he flattens me with something big to get my attention.
The way God speaks to us, or whatever your word is, God, universe, soul, divine, spirit, well, whatever it is, right? It whispers.
Yep.
It whispers. And if we don't whisper, then it taps us on the shoulder. And if we still don't listen, it'll nudge us. And if we still don't listen, then the brick over the head.
Yep. Oh, exactly, man. You said it perfectly there. Did you open up about this in your book at all or no?
The meningitis?
The meningitis.
Yeah, no. That's actually a story I kind of forgotten.
Oh, wow.
It was something, and I think it's because I didn't pull like a really deep takeaway from it. But I talk about being sexually abused when I was 6 years old.
Hey, same.
Yeah, we're
dude.
Jeez. Here's the takeaway on this, because my sexual abuse, I was 6 years old. It wasn't malicious. It was a friend, a kid on my street, who was a couple years older than me, who was really curious. And when I'd go over to his house, hang out in his basement, he'd ask me to take my pants off, and felt very, very violated and a lot of shame about it.
Yep.
And it was this big secret that I kept forever. I never told anyone. And what's really sad and fascinating at the same time is that when he was 16 years old, he got in a car accident and died.
Oh, mate.
And my first thought when that happened was relief. I'm like, okay, phew, now no one will know our secret.
Wow. Truly
going to the grave, right? And I suppressed it. I shoved it deep down inside. I never told anyone. I tried to forget it. And in an ayahuasca session, I'm in this ceremony. It's anyone who's not familiar with an ayahuasca session, it's not like, hey, it's Friday night, let's go do ayahuasca and hang. No, it's very intense. It's very ceremonial. You work with a shaman who usually has a bloodline. It's ayahuasca is not fun. It's very intense. It's very overwhelming. You purge. It's a whole thing. You prepare for months for it. It's not just like going to get high with your friends. So anyways, I'm in the ceremony setting, and this memory of this kid's basement keeps kind of like coming into my hallucination. I'm like, why am I thinking about this? Like, why is this coming up? I'm doing ayahuasca right now. I don't want to think about this. And then I'm like, oh, wait, there's probably something here. And so I kind of surrendered into the experience, and I started reliving it and reliving this really intense emotion and kind of seeing myself as a little scared 6-year-old. And I have a lot of empathy for that version of myself. And when it was all said and done, it started connecting some dots for me. And the experience showed me that, like, in my life, especially in high school and in college, I had a lot of friends who were girls. I could make friends with girls very easily, right? And connect with them. It would be strictly platonic. But I always had a little bit more difficult time making friends with guys. And it showed me the reason is because another story I created in my subconscious was that men will hurt you and they'll come on to you. So you need to subconsciously create a barrier and a wall and keep men at a distance so they don't abuse you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been telling myself this story and keeping men at a distance because my very first best friend abused me. And through working with therapists and whatnot, I was able to overcome that. And now it's like I have tons of guy friends, and it's not quote unquote gay. Not that that's a bad thing, but like it's not gay and it's not bad and they're not going to abuse you. And it's literally changed my life. And it was something that I would have never connected, that sexual abuse was actually affecting personal relationships 25 years later.
I call it the traumatic days. So a similar thing happened to me, except he He was a family friend. He was from our church, actually, our old one, very old one. And, you know, you don't think that someone has the capability of doing something like this in that sort of environment. Like you build that sense of trust. We were good friends. He was, I think, 14 or 15 at the time. He was a curious kid, granted. And he put his hand down my pants, started sort of jacking me off, if I can use that explanation, for 15 seconds or thereabouts, takes his hand out, and then he says, if you tell anyone, I'll hurt you. But I sort of laughed it off, like, because I didn't understand right then the full extent of what that actually meant. And the next day, I actually told my mum, yelled it out actually, and I was laughing about it. And then that's when sort of my parents tried their best to handle the situation. But ultimately, what that did for me is my brain, as a way of protecting myself, created this daze. So I went through life after that point, and I would have these flashbacks. Like they would come just at random times in my life. The couch, the hand down my pants, or his face even. And I was like, what's that? Like, I didn't fully grasp it. That was the traumatic days that I was walking around for a long period of time. I had a lot of shame, a lot of, I didn't understand what that actually meant. Another man or boy, abusing another boy in that way. So what does that say about me as a man now? And I had to go on this, like, it was actually last year in September on Father's Day that I got up the courage to ask the question. And then in that moment of realization that actually happened, it was like, damn, now what?
Wow.
Another journey in of itself. But It doesn't have to be this, repeat, I was abused this many times, or it can be so subtle. It doesn't have to be gigantic, right? It can be so small.
Your trauma is valid.
But it's still trauma.
Yeah, still trauma. Trauma. There's no gauge on trauma, right? Trauma is trauma.
No.
So a lot of times people will have trauma shame, where it's like, okay, I had this little trauma, but so-and-so got raped multiple times as a kid. So who am I to come out and express my trauma when so-and-so has it so much worse? Mine's just minimal and it's not a big deal, right? And so a lot of people fall into that trap where they don't think it's intense enough to come forward and try and heal it, but it's still having a dramatic influence on the way you live.
That's right, man. So if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
How old do you think? How old do I look?
26.
32. Thank you, though.
Jeez, man. So I'm 24, bro. So when did all this, like, what age were you when all this started happening?
What do you mean, like the healing?
The healing process.
Yeah, it started, June 10th, 2017, right? The night of the cabin. That night dramatically changed the course of my life.
And do you feel like you're fully healed?
I don't know. I would say, I don't know if we ever get fully healed, right? But I would say those big traumatic experiences, I feel like I've healed the big ones, right? The big rock that pulled out of the stream, And I like to think that I'm a humble guy in some aspects, but it's something I'm extremely proud of. I'm extremely proud of my personal work. I've spent a lot of time on it, and I took it very seriously. And I looked at the tough questions. I looked at the ugly parts of my life. And that's truly the intention of the book, is to give people permission to start their journey, to remove these roadblocks stopping them, right? To do their healing work. Because listen, I had everything: money, cars, girls, trips, sporting events, and I was miserable. I do my healing work and I get so aligned internally that I feel like I've got this just never ending rush of energy and love pouring out of me. It doesn't matter what happens externally, right? Because I'm so aligned internally. And I always say that your internal state dictates your external experience. I could say, hey, I'll give you whatever you want: cars, the nicest house on the beach with the Maserati and the hottest partner, right? And $1 billion in the bank, but you're going to be depressed and anxious all the time.
Mm.
You don't want it, right? You want the feeling you think those things will bring, right? But if you're full of love and enthusiasm and joy and excited about your life, and you live, in a mediocre neighborhood with a mediocre car and a very below average, you take that every day. You want the feeling you think it's going to bring. And so the book is really, I'm not a licensed therapist. I don't have any medical degrees or whatnot, but through stories, I tell people, hey, this is what I learned. And I hope to encourage people to start their personal work, because it really is so beautiful on the other side.
Very similar to me, man, except
Yeah.
you're further ahead than what I am. So congratulations on everything that you've achieved, the healing process, the book. I think it's going to help a lot of lives. The title is, say it again.
Oh, we're alive, baby.
Holy shit, we're alive. There we go.
So what happened, the way the title of that came was, I was in an ayahuasca experience. It was my second night ever. So my first night ever was brutal. It was really intense, really heavy, really like cleaning out a lot of old garbage and dealing with a lot of trauma and, dealing with my ex-girlfriend and whatnot. It was really intense. The next night, I kind of got insights on what my life would look like if I lived up to who I truly am. And I kind of like completely zoomed out of the earthly experience. I got what I call the cosmic perspective. And then I was able to see myself. I see my body. And I remember looking at my hand and being like, I just think and I can close my fist. Like, that's crazy. Like, I have this incredible meat suit and this strong body. And I saw Earth as like this cosmic adventure where it's like we have art and music and we have these incredible brains where we can learn things in language. And like, what's really crazy is you're in Australia right now and we're on a talking face to face through like this internet that someone invented. Like, this is crazy. And I remember just like, it was like I was seeing the earth for the first time. And I had this moment, I'm like, holy shit, this is what it feels like to be alive. And I remember like leaning up in the center, like, holy shit, we're alive. And that's kind of the title of the book. It's like, yeah, like, holy shit, like we have the most incredible, beautiful experience right in front of us. Being human is the most incredible gift. We have so much opportunity and beautiful beaches and mountain ranges and plants and animals and music and art and food, and we can create and we can connect and we have all these things. But the reason we're not enjoying our lives is because we're stuck in a story of how we think life is supposed to be.
Yeah. You said it, man. When does the book come out officially?
August 10th is the release date. You can pre-order it now. Pre-orders are on thedailyshifts.com and also on Amazon. Amazon should be launching soon. So if you can't find it on Amazon, go to thedailyshifts.com. You get the exact same book, but you'll be able to find it on our website and on Amazon. And
the Daily Shifts, by the way, is another story entirely, which we could get into, but for the sake of time, mate, this has been good. 2 final questions for you, if you don't mind, man. Do you feel like anything is missing currently in your life?
I don't think missing is the right word, right? I feel very aligned with who I am. I do feel like there are things in my life that can enhance my human experience that I don't currently have. Missing maybe feels like there's something lacking. I don't feel like there's lack, but I feel like it can be enhanced. Good. I like that. I feel that like it's true. So this is my final question. It's a hypothetical one. It's one of my all-time favorite ones that I always ask everyone at the end. So I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. It might be a wild film, but that doesn't matter. And don't ask me how they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of an argument. But they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life? I want it to say that my life was an adventure of experience that helped and inspired people to really help other humans remember why they're here. Right? I feel like that's my purpose, is to help remind people why you're on Earth, is to have a human experience and to fully participate in your life And so I would hope this film was a recollection of memories and experiences that help light that spark in other people as we experience life together.
Holy crap, Doug Cartwright, thank you so much for coming on the Storybox podcast and sharing a little bit about your story, man.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.